From Mr. and Mrs. to moving on, the ever-evolving story of Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza. In the ever-emotional world of fandoms and shipping, stories are often shaped not just by what is real, but by what people hope, imagine, and hold on to. One of the most talked about narratives today is the idea that Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza once became Mr. and Mrs. in the hearts of fans, only to eventually go their separate ways, opening the door for new pairings and fresh beginnings. But beyond the headlines and speculation, this story reflects something deeper about love, change, and the way people move forward. When fans wrote their own fairy tale, at the height of Aldub, millions of fans witnessed something magical. The chemistry between Alden and Maine felt effortless, natural, and real. It didn't take long for supporters to imagine a future beyond the screen, a future where the story didn't just stay fictional, but became reality. In that shared imagination, they were no longer just a love team. They were Mr. and Mrs., a symbol of a love that many believed could last forever. The reality behind the dream. But real life, unlike stories, does not always follow the script we hope for. As time passed, both Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza began to focus on their individual journeys, growing as artists, exploring new opportunities, and navigating life beyond the expectations of a love team. And while fans continued to hold on to the idea of them together, reality quietly moved in a different direction. If there was ever a Mr. and Mrs. moment, it lived more in the hearts of fans than in confirmed reality. 2 years later, a turning point. As the story goes, after 2 years of distance, whether emotional, professional, or simply a matter of life taking its course, the narrative began to shift. Fans started noticing changes, fewer interactions, separate projects, different circles and priorities. And slowly, the idea of them as a couple began to fade, not completely, but enough to make room for something new. The rise of new ships. In fandom culture, change often brings reinvention. As Alden and Maine continued their individual paths, new pairings began to emerge. Fans, while still holding on to Aldub memories, started exploring fresh dynamics, new chemistry, and different possibilities. This is the nature of shipping. It evolves. It adapts. It reflects the present while still honoring the past. For some, this shift was exciting, a chance to see Alden and Maine in new lights. For others, it was bittersweet, a reminder that the story they once believed in so deeply was no longer the same. Letting go without forgetting. One of the hardest things for any fan base is learning how to let go. Not in a way that erases the past, but in a way that allows growth. Because the truth is, what Aldub created will never disappear. It has already become part of pop culture history, part of people's lives, part of something bigger than just a love team. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that people grow, stories change, and life moves forward. Respecting their individual journeys. Today, Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza continue to thrive in their own ways. They are no longer just defined by Aldub. They are individuals with their own goals, dreams, and identities. And perhaps the most meaningful way fans can show love now is by supporting them, not just as a pair, but as individuals. The beauty of new beginnings. New ships don't erase old ones. They simply add new chapters. For Alden, for Maine, and for the fans, this is a chance to rediscover excitement, to embrace change, and to appreciate different forms of connection. Because love stories, whether real or imagined, are not always meant to stay the same. Some are meant to evolve. Final reflection. A story that still matters. Whether they were ever truly Mr. and Mrs. or simply a powerful on-screen partnership, one thing remains undeniable. The impact of Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza is real. They created something that millions felt. They told a story that people believed in. They built a connection that still lingers today. And even as new ships rise and new stories unfold, Aldub will always be remembered as the one that made people feel something truly special. Because some stories don't need to last forever to matter. They just need to be real while they exist. The emotional shift within the fandom. As time passed and new narratives began to form, the Aldub community itself started to evolve. Some fans chose to fully embrace new pairings, excited to see fresh chemistry and different stories unfold. Others held on tightly to the past, keeping the Aldub flame alive no matter what changes came. And then there were those in between. Fans who understood both sides. Fans who cherished what was, but accepted what is. This emotional shift wasn't easy, but it was real. It reflected growth, maturity, and the understanding that not all meaningful connections are meant to stay the same forever. The weight of expectations. For years, Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza carried not just their own careers, but the expectations of millions. Every glance was analyzed. Every word was interpreted. Every action became a headline. And while that level of attention came from love, it also brought pressure to meet expectations that were sometimes impossible to fulfill. In many ways, stepping into new paths may not have been just a choice. It may have been a necessity. Growth that happens away from the spotlight. One of the most overlooked parts of any public story is what happens off camera. Growth, personal growth, emotional growth, professional growth. As Alden and Maine continued their journeys, they experienced life in ways that fans may never fully see. Lessons learned in private, decisions made quietly, and changes that shaped who they are today. And that growth naturally leads to change, because people are not meant to stay the same forever. Why new pairings don't erase the past. The rise of new ships often creates a sense of division among fans, but it doesn't have to. Because the truth is, new beginnings don't cancel old memories. The laughter from Aldub still exists. The killing moments are still cherished. The connection is still remembered. At the same time, new pairings offer something different, a new energy, a new story, a new experience for both the artists and the audience. And both can exist at the same time. A different kind of love from fans. As the narrative shifts, the love from fans also begins to transform. It becomes less about holding on, and more about supporting. Supporting Alden in his new projects. Supporting Maine in her personal and professional growth. Supporting their happiness, whatever form it takes. This kind of love is quieter, but deeper. It doesn't demand, it understands. The legacy of what if. Even as new stories unfold, there will always be that lingering question in the hearts of some fans. What if? What if things turned out differently? What if the timing was right? What if the story continued the way they imagined? But sometimes, what if is not meant to be answered. Sometimes, it exists simply to remind us of how deeply we once believed in something. Choosing to move forward. At some point, every fan must make a choice. To stay in the past, or to move forward while carrying the past with them. And for many, the healthiest path is somewhere in between. To remember without being stuck. To support without expecting. To appreciate without needing everything to stay the same. Because growth, both for fans and for Alden and Maine, is part of the journey. Final reflection, not the end, just a new chapter. The story of Alden Richards and Maine Mendoza as Mr. and Mrs., whether real or imagined, may no longer be the present narrative. But that doesn't make it meaningless. It simply makes it a chapter. A chapter filled with joy, excitement, and unforgettable moments. A chapter that shaped millions of hearts. A chapter that will always be remembered. And now, as new ships rise and new stories begin, another chapter is being written. Different, unexpected, but just as meaningful in its own way. Because in the end, stories don't lose their value when they change. They simply grow into something new.